On most yachts, misery is tradition, soaked through, wind-burnt, and congratulating yourself for it. That's why when the Fisher Motor Sailor arrived in the late 70s looking like a tugboat with sails, purists jeered. They called it the floating greenhouse. They swore no real captain would ever hide behind glass. Yet while others shivered, battling the North Sea, one boat quietly redefined what it means to survive out there. Dry, alert, unbroken. If comfort was heresy, why did the Fisher outlast the Mockery? The answer unsettled the very heart of sailing's cult of suffering. Salt spray on your face, numb hands clamped to a tiller, and the ache of cold settling into your bones. This is the currency of respect in most yacht clubs. It is not enough to cross an ocean, you have to look like you have wrestled with it. The open cockpit is more than a design choice. It is a rite of passage. Sailors swap stories of night watches spent soaked to the skin, of storms endured in nothing but layers of wool and stubbornness. The more miserable the tale, the greater the applause at the bar. Wet gear is not just for survival, it is a badge of authenticity. The real captains, the ones with salt in their veins, are supposed to suffer for every mile. The ritual is almost religious. Oilskins pulled on before dawn, boots sloshing with icy water, the wind howling so loud you cannot hear yourself curse. To steer from behind glass is heresy. To drink coffee while the storm rages outside is unthinkable. In this world, comfort is suspect, and shelter is for the weak. The sea, they say, is meant to be felt on your skin, not just seen through a window. That is why anything that promises warmth and dryness, a wheelhouse, a heater, a dry chart table, gets dismissed as cheating. The cult of suffering is alive and well, policed by those who believe that hardship is the true measure of a sailor. When the Fisher 34 first appeared at the dock, the laughter started before the lines were even tied off. In a sea of sleek white sloops, here was a boat that looked like it had wandered in from the working harbor by mistake. The yacht club grapevine wasted no time. One wag called it a tugboat with sails, another dubbed it the greenhouse, and the name stuck like barnacles. The wheelhouse, big, boxy, and unapologetically practical, became the punchline at every marina bar from Cornwall to Copenhagen. Retirement home on the water, someone sneered. Powerboat with a stick, another chimed in. Even the Fisher's proud, double-ended stern drew snickers. Looks like a bathtub that forgot to stop growing. Press reviews in the late 70s did not hold back either. Headlines questioned whether real sailors would ever accept a boat that let you steer in slippers. Advertisements for the Fisher's rivals took subtle digs, showing windblown crews grinning through the spray while the Fisher's captain looked out from behind glass, warm and suspiciously content. The message was clear: comfort was for quitters. If you did not come back to the dock dripping and exhausted, you were doing it wrong. The Fisher was branded as the oddball, the outlier, the boat for people who had given up on the romance of the sea and settled for central heating. For years, the nicknames piled up, each one a little saltier than the last. But the Fisher's designers did not flinch. They knew what the North Sea could do to a boat and to a sailor. While the critics sharpened their jokes, the Fisher quietly prepared for weather that would wipe the grin off any fair-weather purist's face. The Fisher 34's shape didn't come from a designer's sketchpad or a yacht club wish list. Its bones trace back to the Baltic, where Norwegian fishing boats, Colin Archer's double-ended rescue cutters, earned their reputation working through North Sea winters. Instead of a flat transom, the Fisher's canoe stern curves gently to a point, splitting following seas instead of letting them pile up and threaten the helm. That is not just tradition, it is survival. The Fisher's hull is a direct descendant, built not for show but for heavy weather. Launched in 1978, the Fisher 34 carries almost 12 tons of displacement on a hull just over 34 feet long. That is not yachting excess, it is the weight of history, built into every inch of glass, reinforced plastic, and cast iron. A ballast ratio hovering around 50% means the keel holds nearly half the boat's mass. Buried deep, giving her a writing moment that shrugs off knockdowns and keeps the deck above water when the sea turns ugly. High bulwarks run the length of the deck, solid walls instead of wire lifelines. Step aboard, and you do not feel exposed, you feel surrounded, as if the boat itself is holding you in place. This is the logic of the working boat, not the racer. Everything about the Fisher's hull says protection, not performance for its own sake. The wide beam and long, full keel are not about speed, they are about tracking straight when the wind howls and the waves stack up. The hull's prismatic shape, the deep bilges, the way the stern tucks under, all of it comes from a lineage where comfort is measured not in cushions, but in the odds of making it back to port. Naval architects who know their history will tell you, the Fisher's form is a direct answer to the North Sea's worst moods. It is not a toy, it is a tool, forged from a century of lessons learned the hard way. On paper, the Fisher 34 weighs in at 25,759 pounds, over 11.5 metric tons. That is not just heavy for a 34-footer, it is in a different league from the average fiberglass cruiser. Nearly half that weight, 10,640 pounds, is pure ballast locked deep inside the hull as encapsulated cast iron. The ballast ratio hovers around 41%, a number that would make a racing skipper blink. For the Fisher, it means a keel that does not just keep the boat upright, it keeps the sea in its place. Surveyors who have crawled through the bilges and tapped on the frames will tell you, this is not a boat that gets bullied. The hull thickness at the turn of the bilge can reach 1 inch in places. Reinforced frames, deep bilges, and a long full keel, every inch of it is designed to resist the kind of punishment that would turn a lighter boat into driftwood. The comfort ratio, calculated at just over 51, puts the Fisher in the top tier for motion comfort. In heavy weather, that translates to less rolling, less pitching, and a crew that can actually sleep off watch. Critics love to point at the wheelhouse and call it a liability. Too much windage, they say. In a marina with a crosswind, sure, the Fisher's boxy cabin will catch a gust. But out at sea, windage is just a number. The boat's mass and momentum take over. Picture an animation, wind arrows slamming into the glass, but the hull barely budges. The physics are simple. Force equals mass times acceleration. When you have 12 tons of inertia, a gust that would knock a lightweight sloop sideways barely nudges the Fisher off course. The long keel acts like a rail, keeping the bow pointed where it belongs, while the heavy ballast makes sure the boat stands up to its canvas. One surveyor put it plainly, you can load her up with provisions for a month and the waterline barely moves. In a blow, she tracks like a cutter. The wheelhouse windage is a non-issue offshore. What matters is that the boat stays on her feet, and the Fisher does. For all the jokes about powerboats with sticks, the numbers tell a different story. This is a boat built to ignore the elements, not just endure them. The debate over windage ends here, buried under 25,000 pounds of proof. Out in the shipping lanes, when the weather turns foul, most boats start to dance to the sea's tune. A lightweight sloop rides up the face of a wave, teeters at the crest, and then slams hard into the trough. The motion is sharp, unpredictable. Everything loose becomes a missile. The crew braces with every impact, knuckles white on the rail, eyes squinting against the salt spray. One wave after another, the hull shudders and the rigging groans. The boat's bow veers off course, then snaps back as the rudder bites. Every gust threatens to knock her down. Sleep is out of the question. Even standing up feels like a gamble. Now picture the Fisher 34 in the same conditions. The wind howls just as loud, the waves just as steep, but the motion is different. The hull doesn't bounce or slam. It shoulders aside the water, heavy and deliberate. Instead of pitching and rolling, the Fisher moves with a slow, powerful rhythm. Thud, pause, thud. The canoe stern splits the following seas, sending water streaming harmlessly past. High bulwarks keep the deck secure. The long keel tracks straight, resisting every shove from the waves. There's no sudden lurch, no wild broach. The boat just keeps plowing forward, steady as a train on rails. On a sloop, every hour at the helm is a battle. The cockpit floods with spray. Foul weather gear is soaked through, boots slosh, and the cold seeps in. Visibility drops as glasses, fog, and rain pelts your face. Fatigue creeps in fast. Mistakes multiply. The crew's focus narrows to the next wave, the next gust, the next shiver. The storm becomes the only reality. Inside the fisher's wheelhouse, a different world exists. The captain stands behind glass, wipers sweeping away the rain. The chart table stays dry. The mug of coffee doesn't slide across the surface. The sound of the storm is muffled to a dull roar. Every decision is made with a clear head, not through a haze of exhaustion. The helm responds with reassuring weight, not frantic overcorrection. While other boats fight for survival, the fisher turns the chaos outside into background noise. The real test isn't how much punishment you can take, it's how much control you can keep. Out here, the fisher doesn't just endure the storm, it dominates it. Inside the fisher's wheelhouse, the storm outside becomes a distant rumor. The wind might scream and the rain might lash, but in here, the world is different. The glass panes wrap around the helm, offering a panoramic view of the sea's fury without letting a single drop inside. The wipers beat a steady rhythm, clearing salt spray from the windshield while the captain stands in a sweater, hands warm on the wheel. There is a kettle whistling on the stove, charts laid out dry and unruffled, and a mug of coffee that stays put through every thud and roll. For most sailors, this is a fantasy. On a typical sloop, you spend hours in foul weather gear, water trickling down your neck, glasses fogged, fingers too stiff to grip a pencil. Every watch is a test of endurance. Fatigue creeps in, slow at first, then all at once. Decisions get sloppy. Nerves fray. The sea does not need to break your boat to break your will, it just needs to wear you down. Safety experts know the math. Fatigue is the real killer offshore. It is not the storm that gets you, it is the mistakes made when you are cold, wet, and running on empty. The fisher rewrites this script. Owners talk about crossing the North Sea and arriving rested, not wrecked. One veteran tells of a night passage where the wind never dropped below force 8. On any other boat, he says, he would have been soaked and shivering, counting the hours until dawn. On the fisher, he brewed tea, plotted his course, and watched the storm through clear glass, as if the sea were a wild animal safely caged outside. The oilskins hung unused by the door. The heater kept the chill at bay. He made every decision with a clear head, not through a fog of exhaustion. This is the so-called fishbowl, the insult turned upside down. Critics claimed the wheelhouse cut you off from the sea. In reality, it gives you a front row seat to the ocean's power, all while keeping the ocean where it belongs, on the other side of the glass. The 360-degree view means you see everything, but you do not have to suffer for it. The wet gear, once a badge of pride, becomes a symbol of an older, harder way. On the fisher, it hangs by the door, a reminder that surviving the sea does not have to mean surrendering to it. The real proof is not in the specs or the stats, it is in the quiet confidence of a skipper who arrives at landfall rested, sharp, and ready for whatever comes next. A Fisher 34 built in 1978 can still command over £100,000 on the used market. That's not nostalgia, it's economics. Brokers do not have to work hard to explain the price. The boat's reputation does the selling. Listings from the United Kingdom and Europe regularly show late 70s fishers fetching more than a Beneteau from the 2000s of the same length. One broker in Fiumicino posted a Fisher 34 at €55,000, 20 years older than the competition and still in demand. Buyers are not looking for speed or flash. They want a boat that shrugs off a North Sea gale and comes back for more. They want solid hand-laid glass, a wheelhouse that keeps the charts dry, and a hull that does not flinch when fully loaded for a month offshore. The story repeats itself from broker to broker. Buyers walk past rows of shiny production cruisers, then stop cold at the Fisher. They know exactly what they are getting. A survivor, not a show pony. The price premium is not just about rarity. It is about trust, built up over decades and storms weathered. In a market that usually punishes age, the Fisher's value stands stubbornly apart. Walk the docks in any serious cruising port today, and you will spot a pattern that would have baffled the old guard. The sleek racer cruisers have not disappeared, but the boats that turn heads among ocean veterans are the ones with glass-wrapped pilot saloons and sturdy, trawler-inspired hulls. Garcia, Kraken, Boreal, names that dominate the expedition yacht scene, all offer designs that echo the Fisher's core idea. Get the crew inside, keep the elements out, and make long passages not just survivable, but comfortable. What was once dismissed as a greenhouse is now the gold standard for high-latitude voyaging. The Fisher's wheelhouse, once a punchline, has become the blueprint. Modern pilot saloons boast panoramic glass, heated interiors, and sheltered helms that let skippers watch the sea's worst moods with dry hands and clear eyes. The same priorities, protection, visibility, and fatigue reduction, are now selling points for boats built to cross oceans and dodge icebergs. The market has spoken. The features that drew laughter in the yacht clubs of the 1970s are now copied by the most respected builders in blue water sailing. In the end, the Fisher did not just survive ridicule. It set the course for a new kind of seamanship, one where the smartest sailors choose warmth, safety, and control, even if it means looking a little different at the dock. Today, even high-end expedition yachts are borrowing what critics once mocked: glass, warmth, and shelter at sea. As climate chaos drives more storms into every ocean, survival means adaptation, not tradition. The Fisher's lesson is clear. Comfort is not weakness, and real seamanship is staying afloat, not soaking wet. When the next gale hits, the smart sailor keeps dry and keeps going. Share your thoughts on what makes a real boat below.